Hi. Hello. Hi. Hello. Okay, I need to drink water. How are we? I see the people have said hi. Hi. How are you? There you go. There we go. Chapter 7. Hey, yeah. That's what we're doing today. I feel like I should take my socks. I'm really sweaty. I don't know if I'm just nervous, but I don't want to get cold. You might get cold. It's going to get cold really quickly. This isn't my room. I'm once again with my girlfriend. Hi. 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 And this is her bedroom. This is her other bedroom because I've done a couple live streams at her room, but this is her other room. So I'm not, yeah. If I'm extra awkward, it's because you're looking at me. And I look at you every time. I know. Well, yeah, but that's over a computer screen. I don't know that you're watching. You do not get awkward at my mother's house. Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay, fine. So, but also, when I'm with someone else, these typically go better. So let's see how it goes, if it goes any better. Because I'd like to get through this entire chapter, because we haven't done that in a while. So we have a few, I've already said that, didn't I? No. We have 5 pages left of this chapter 6, which is when Mike sees the bird. And then we're starting chapter 7, which is when they build the dam of Barrens. It's a chapter that I've been waiting for this entire time. And then we're hopefully going to finish that chapter. We better finish that chapter because I'd like to. So, are we ready? I saw like 5 people come in and leave, so that's fun. It's all right though, because it's okay. We're going to read anyways, and people can watch it later if they want to. If anyone wants to leave, that's fine. They can leave and cut and then watch it later when they have a better time. I don't know where I left off. I meant to mark it. I forgot. The first paragraph. Okay. All right, so this is chapter 6. I forget what it's called. We're on page 284 for people following along in their own books. We're going to finish up chapter 6. I already said that. There was silence, and then that crackly, rustling sound began again as the bird resumed forcing itself onto the pipe. Mike felt along on the floor, found other pieces of tile, and began to throw one after another. They thumped and thudded off the bird, and then clinked to the tile sleeve of the smokestack. Please God, Mike thought incoherently. Please God, please God, please God. It came to him that he ought to retreat down to the smokestack's bore. He had run in through what had been the stack's base. It stood to reason that it would narrow as he backed up. He could retreat, yes, and listen to that low, dusty rustle as the bird worked its way in after him. He would retreat, and if he was lucky, he might get beyond the point where the bird could continue to advance. What if the bird got stuck? If that happened, he and the bird would die in here together. They would die in here together and rot in here together in the dark. Please God, he screamed, and was totally unaware that he had cried out loud. He threw another piece of tile, and this time his throw was more powerful. He felt, he told the others much later, as if someone were behind him at that moment, and that someone had given his arm a tremendous push. This time there was no feathery thud. Instead, there was a splatting sound, the sound a kid's hand might make, slapping into the surface of a bowl of half-solidified jello. This time the bird screamed not in anger, but in real pain. The tenebrous whir of his wings filled the smokestack. Stinking air streamed past Mike in a hurricane, flapping his clothes, making him cough and gag and retreat as dust and moss flew. Light appeared again, gray and weak at first, then brightening and shifting as the bird retreated from the stack's muzzle. Mike burst into tears, fell to his knees again, and began grabbing madly for more pieces of tile. Without any conscious thought, he ran forward with both hands full of tiling. In the light he could see the pieces were splotched with blue-gray moss and lichen, like the surface of slate gravestones, till he was nearly at the mouth of the stack. He intended to keep the bird from coming back in if he could. It bent down, cocking its head the way a trained bird in a perch will sometimes cock its head, and Mike saw where his last shot had struck home. The bird's right eye was nearly gone. Instead of that glittering bubble of fresh tar, there was a crater filled with blood. Oh, wouldn't that be neat? If in the fortune cookie scene, you know how one of the fortune cookies is an eye? The bird's eye? Has anyone thought of that? I just thought of it. I'm writing it down. Sorry. What a cool thing that could have been. Oh, that's interesting. Bird's eye? Let's see if I know what that means. Okay. Whitish gray goo dripped from the corner of the socket and trickled along the side of the bird's beak. Tiny parasites wriggled and squirmed its way. No. Tiny parasites wriggled and squirmed in this pussy's discharge. It saw him and lunged forward. Mike began to throw chunks of tile at it. It struck its head and beak. It withdrew for a moment, then lunged again, beak opening, revealing that pink lining again, revealing something else that caused Mike to freeze for a moment, his own mouth dropping open. The bird's tongue was silver, its surface as crazy cracked as the surface of a volcanic island. Oh, nope. A volcanic land, which has first baked and then slagged off. And on this tongue, like weird tumbleweeds that had taken temporary root there, were a number of orange puffs. Mike threw the last of his tiles directly into that gaping maw, and the bird withdrew again, screaming its frustration, rage, and pain. For a moment, Mike could see its reptilian talons. Then its wings ruffled the air and it was gone. A moment later, he lifted his face. Yeah, a face that was gray-brown under the dust, dirt, and bits of moss that the bird's wind machine wings had blown at him, toward the clicking sound of its talons on the tile. The only clean places on Mike's face were the tracks that had been washed clean by his tears. The bird walked back and forth overhead. Tack, 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 tack. Mike retreated a bit, gathered up more chunks of tile, and heaped them as close to the mouth of the stack as he dared. If the thing came back, he wanted to be able to fire at it from point-blank range. The light outside was still bright, now that it was May. Now that it was May, it wouldn't get dark for a long time yet, but suppose the bird just decided to wait. Mike swallowed, the dry sides of his throat rubbing together for a moment. Overhead. Tack, tack, tack. He had a fine pile of ammunition now. In the dim light, here beyond the place where the angle of the sun made a shadow spiral inside the pipe, it looked like a pile of broken crockery swept together by a housewife. Mike rubbed the palms of his dirty hands along the sides of his jeans and waited to see what would happen next. A space of time passed before something did. Whether 5 minutes or 25, he could not tell. He was only aware of the bird walking back and forth overhead like an insomniac, pacing the floor at 3 a.m. Then its wings fluttered again, and landed in front of the smokestack's opening. Mike, on his knees, just behind the pile of tilling, began to peg missiles at it, before it could even bend its head down. Yeah. One of them slammed into a plated yellow leg and drew a trickle of blood so dark it seemed almost as black as the bird's eyes. Mike screamed in triumph, the sound thin and almost lost under the bird's own enraged squawk. "Get out of here!" Mike cried. "I'm going to keep hitting you until you get out of here. I swear to God I will." The bird flew up to the top of the smokestack and resumed its pacing. Mike waited. Finally, its wings ruffled again as it took off. Mike waited, expecting the yellow feet, like hen's feet, to appear again. They didn't. He waited longer, convinced it had to be some kind of a trick, realizing at last that wasn't why he was waiting at all. He was waiting because he was scared to go out, scared to leave the safety of his bolt hole. Never mind stuff like that. I'm not a rabbit. He took as many chunks of tile as he could handle comfortably, and then put some more inside of his shirt. He set aside the smokestack, trying to look everywhere at once and wishing madly for eyes in the back of his head. He saw only the field stretching ahead and around him, littered with the exploded, rusting remains of the Kitchener ironworks. He whirled around, sure he would see the bird perched on the lip of the stack like a vulture, a one-eyed vulture now, only wanting the boy to see him before it attacked for the final time, using that sharp beak to jab and rip and strip. But the bird was not there. It was really gone. Mike's nerves snapped. He uttered a breaking scream of fear and ran for the weather-beaten fence between the field and the road, dropping the last piece of tile from his hands. Most of the others fell out of his shirt, and the shirt pulled free of his belt. He vaulted over the fence one-handed, like Roy Rogers showing off for Dale Evans on his way back from the corral with Pat Brandy and the rest of the buckaroos. He grabbed the handlebars of his bike and ran beside it 40 feet up the road before getting on. Then he pedaled madly, not daring to look back, not daring to slow down until they reached the intersection of Pasture Road and Outer Main Street, where there were lots of cars passing back and forth. When he got home, his father was changing the plugs on the tractor. Will observed that Mike looked powerfully musty and dusty. Mike hesitated for just a split second and then told his father that he'd taken a tumble from his bike on the way home, swerving to avoid a pothole. "Did you break anything, Mikey?" Will asked, observing his son a little more carefully. "No, sir." "Sprains?" "Uh-huh." Wait, no. Wait. "Uh-huh. That's what it says." "Sure?" Mike nodded. "Did you pick yourself up a souvenir?" Mike reached into his pocket and found the gear wheel. He showed it to his father, who looked at it briefly and then plucked a tiny crumb of tiling from the pad of flesh just below Mike's thumb. He seemed more interested in this. From that old smokestack? Will asked. Mike nodded. You go inside there? Mike nodded again. See anything in there? Will asked, and then, as if to make a joke of the question, which hadn't sounded like a joke at all, he added, Buried treasure? Smiling a little, Mike shook his head. Well, don't tell your mother you were mucking around in there, Will said. She'd shoot me first and you second. He looked even more closely at his son. Mikey, are you right? Huh? You look a little peaky around the eyes. I guess I might be a little tired, Mike said. It's 8 or 10 miles there and back, don't forget. Want some help with the tractor, Daddy? No, I'm about done screwing it up for the week. You go on in and wash up. Mike started away, and then his father called to him once more. Mike looked back. I don't want you going around that place again, he said. At least not until all this trouble is cleared up and they catch the man who's doing this. You didn't see anybody out there, did you? No one chased you or hollered you down? I didn't see any people at all there. No, my gosh, I can't read. I didn't see any people at all. Period, Mike said. Will nodded and lit a cigarette. I think I was wrong to send you there. Old places like that, sometimes they can be dangerous. Their eyes locked briefly. Okay, Daddy, Mike said. I don't want to go back anyway. It was a little spooky. Will nodded again. Less said the better, I reckon. You go and get cleaned up now. And tell her to put on 3 or 4 extra sausages. Mike did. 6. Never mind that now, Mike Hanlon thought, looking at the grooves which went up to the concrete edge of the canal and stopped there. Never mind that. It might have just been a dream anyhow, and there were splotches of dried blood on the lip of the canal. Mike looked at these, and then he looked out into the canal. Black water flowed smoothly past. Runners of dirty yellow foam clung to the canal's side, sometimes breaking free to flow downstream in lazy loops and curves. For a moment, just a moment, 2 clots of this foam came together and seemed to form a face, a kid's face, its eyes turned up in an avatar of green of terror and agony. Mike's breath caught as if on a thorn. The foam broke apart, became meaningless again, and at that moment there was a loud splash on his right. Mike snapped his head around, shrinking back a little, and for a moment he believed he saw something in the shadows of the outflow tunnel where the canal resurfaced after its course under downtown. Then it was gone. Suddenly, cold and shuddering, he dug into his pocket for the knife he found in the grass. He threw it into the canal. There was a small splash, a ripple that began as a circle and then was tugged into the shape of an arrowhead by the current. Then nothing. Nothing except the fear that was suddenly suffocating him, and the deadly certainty that there was something near, something watching him, gouging his chances, biding its time. He turned, meaning to walk back to his bike. To run would be to dignify these fears and undignify himself. Then that splashing sound came again. This is also, I'm realizing now, this is when he found where Eddie Cochran was killed. Yeah. It was a lot louder the second time. So much for dignity. Suddenly he was running as fast as he could, beating his buns for the gate in his bike, jamming the kickstand up with one heel and pedaling for the street as fast as he could. That sea smell was all at once too thick, much too thick. It was everywhere, and the water dripping from the wet branches of the trees seemed much too loud. Something was coming. He heard dragging, lurching footsteps in the grass. He stood on the pedals, giving it everything, and shot out onto Main Street without looking back. He headed for home as fast as he could, wondering what in hell had possessed him to come in the first place, what had drawn him. And then he tried to think about the chores, the whole chores, and nothing but the chores. After a while, he actually succeeded. And when he saw the headline in the paper the next day, Missing Boy Prompts New Fears, he thought about the pocket knife he had thrown into the canal, the pocket knife with the initials E.C. scratched at the side. He thought about the blood he had seen on the grass. And he thought about those grooves which stopped at the edge of the canal. That's the end of chapter 6. Now I get to read chapter 7. Whoa! What we're supposed to be reading today. Alrighty. It starts as a flashback. A flash forward. It's in italics. And it's Eddie in the future. When he's going back to Derry. I think. Yeah, it is, okay. Chapter 7. The Dam and the Barrens. 1. Seen from the expressway at 4:45 in the morning, Boston seems a city of the dead brooding over some tragedy in its past. A plague, perhaps, or a curse. The smell of salts, heavy and cloying, comes off the ocean. Runners of early morning fog obscure much of what movement could be seen otherwise. Driving north along Starrow Drive, sitting behind the wheel of the black '84 Cadillac he picked up from the Butch Kerrigan at Cape Cod Limousine, Eddie Kasprak thinks you can feel the city's age. Perhaps you can get that feeling of age nowhere else in America but here. Boston is a sprat compared with London, an infant compared with Rome. By American standards, at least, it is old. All right. It kept its place on these low hills 300 years ago when the tea and stamp taxes were unthought of, Paul Revere and Patrick Henry unborn. Its age, its silence, and the foggy smell of the sea, all of these make Eddie nervous. When Eddie's nervous, he reaches for his aspirator. He sticks it in his mouth and triggers a cloud of revivifying sprays down his throat. I don't know. There are a few people in the streets he's passing, and a pedestrian or two on the walkways of the overpass. They give lie to the impression that he has somehow wandered into a Lovecrafty tale of doomed cities, ancient evils, and monsters with unpronounceable names. Here, ganged around the bus stop with a sign reading Kenmore Square City Center, he sees waitresses, nurses, city employees, their faces naked and puffed with sleep. That's right, Eddie thinks, now he's passing under a sign which reads Tobin Bridge. That's right, stick to the buses. Forget the subway. Subways are a bad idea. I wouldn't go down there if I were you. Not down below. Not in the tunnels. This is a bad thought to have. If he doesn't get rid of it, he will soon have to be using the aspirator again. He's glad for the heavier traffic in that Tobin Bridge. He passes a monument works. Painted on the brick side is a slightly unsettling admonishment. Slow down. We can wait. Here is a green reflectorized sign which reads, to 95 Maine, New Hampshire, all northern New England points. He looks at it, and suddenly a bone-deep shoulder racks his body. His hands momentarily wheel themselves to the wheeled Cadillac. Weld themselves to the wheeled Cadillac. He would like to believe it is the onset of some sickness, a virus, or perhaps one of his mother's phantom fevers, but he knows better. It is the city behind him, poised silently on the straight edge that runs between day and night, and what that sign promises ahead of him. He's sick, all right, no doubt about that, but it's not a virus or a phantom fever. He's been poisoned by his own memories. I'm scared, Eddie thinks. That was always what was at the bottom of it, just being scared. That was everything. But in the end, I think we turned that around somehow. We used to. We used it. But how? He can't remember. He wonders if any of the others can. For all their sakes, he certainly hopes so. A truck drones by on his left. Eddie has still got his lights on, and now he hits his brights momentarily as the truck draws safely ahead. He does this without thinking. It has become an automatic function, just part of driving for a living. The unseen driver in the truck flashes his running lights in return, quickly twice, thanking Eddie for his courtesy. If only everything could be that simple and that clear, he thinks. He follows the signs to I-95. The northbound traffic is light, although he observes that the southward lanes into the city are starting to fill up, even at this early hour. Eddie floats the big car along, pre-guessing most of the directional signs and getting into the correct lane long before he has to. It has been years, literally years, since he has guessed wrong enough to be swept past an exit he wanted. He makes his lane choices as automatically as he flashed okay to cut back into the trucker, as automatically as he once found his way through a tangle of paths in the Dairy Barrens. The fact that he has never before in his life driven out of downtown Boston, one of the most confusing cities in America to drive in, does not seem to matter much at all. He suddenly remembers something else about the summer. I need to... my throat. Okay. Also, it's my favorite Eddie fact that he can navigate through anywhere, everywhere. I love that so much. It's so cool. Oh, your little feet are in it. Hi. Okay. Let's see if that's any better. He suddenly remembered something else about that summer, something Bill said to him one day. You've got a... Oh, shoot, I forgot how to do this letter. A compass in your head, Eddie. How that had pleased him. It pleased him again as the 84 Dorado shoots back into the turnpike. He slides the limo speed up to cop safe 57 miles an hour and finds some quiet music on the radio. He took the limo? Everyone, can we just imagine that for a second? Eddie pulling up to Data the Orient in the limo? But, like, he's driving the limo? They're, like, in the back of it, and he drives back to the townhouse. Oh, my gosh. That's so funny. He took the limo. Poor Myra. Myra? However you pronounce it. He slides the limo speed... I already said that. He supposes he would have died for Bill back then, if that had been required. If Bill had asked him, Eddie would simply have responded, "Sure, Big Bill. You got a time in mind yet?" Eddie laughs at this. Not much of a sound, just a snort. But the sound of it startles him into a real laugh. He laughs seldom these days, and he certainly did not expect many chucks, Richie's word, meaning chuckles, as in, you got any good chucks today, Eds? On this black pilgrimage. But he supposes, if God is dirty mean enough to curse the faithful with what they want most in life, maybe he's quirky enough to deal with you with a good chuck or two along the way. Had any chucks lately? I can't say this line. Had any good chucks lately, Eds? He says out loud and laughs again. Man, he had hated when Richie had called him Eds. But he sort of liked it too. I said that wrong. Man, he had hated it when Richie called him Eds, but he had sort of liked it too. The way he thought Ben Hanscom got to like Richie calling him Haystack. It was something. Like a secret name. A secret identity. A way to be people that had nothing to do with their parents' fears, hopes, constant demands. Richie couldn't do his beloved voices for shit, but maybe he did know how important it was for creeps like them to sometimes be different people. Eddie glances at the change lineup neatly on the Dorado's dashboard. Lining up the change is another one of those automatic tricks of trade. One of the oh my gosh, I can't read today. Oh no. I'm sorry. Shoot. When the toll booth came up, you never wanted to have to dig in your silver, never want to find that you've gotten an automatic toll lane with the wrong change. Among the coins are 2 or 3 Susan B. Anthony silver dollars. They're coins he reflects you probably only find in the pockets of chauffeurs and taxi drivers from the New York area these days, just as the only place you are apt to see a lot of $2 bills is at a racetrack payoff window. He always keeps a few on hand because the robot toll taker baskets on the George Washington Shrewsbury bridges take them. Another of these lights suddenly comes up in his head. Silver dollars. Not these fake copper sandwiches, but real silver dollars, with Lady Liberty dressed in her gauzy robe stamped upon them. Ben Hanscom's silver dollars. Yes, but wasn't it Bill or Ben or Beverly who once used one of those silver cartwheels to save their lives? He's not quite sure of this, is, in fact, not quite sure of anything. Or is it just that he doesn't want to remember? It was dark in there, he thinks suddenly. Remember that much. It was dark in there. Boston is well behind him now, and the fog's starting to burn off. Ahead is Maine, New Hampshire, all northern New England points. Derry is ahead. And there's something in Derry which should be 27 years dead, and yet somehow not. Something with as many faces as Lon Chaney. What is it really? Didn't they see it at the end of what it really was, with all its masks set aside? I can remember so much, but not enough. He remembers that he loved Bill Denbrough. He remembers that well enough. Bill never made fun of his asthma. Bill never called him a little sissy queer boy. He loved Bill like he would have loved a big brother. Or father. That ruined it. Bill knew stuff to do, places to go, things to see. Bill was never up against it. When you ran with Bill, you ran to beat the devil, and you laughed. But you hardly ever ran out of breath. Hardly ever running out of breath was great, so fucking great, Eddie would tell the world. When you ran with Big Bill, you got your chucks every day. Sure, kid, every day, he says in a Richie Tozier voice, and laughs again. It had been Bill's idea to make a dam in the Barrens, and it was, in a way, the dam that had brought them all together. Ben Hanscom had been the one to show them how the dam could be built. They had built it so well that they'd gone in a lot of trouble with Mr. Nell, the cop on the beat, but it had been Bill's idea. And although all of them, except Richie, had been very odd, had seen very odd things, frightening things in Derry since the turn of that year, it had been Bill who had first found the courage to say something out loud. That damn. He remembered Victor Chris. Ta-ta, boys. It was a real baby dam, believe me. You're better off without it. A day later, Ben Hanscom was grinning at them, saying, We could flood out the two whole barrens if we wanted to. Bill and Eddie looked at Ben. This is out of italics. Bill and Eddie looked at Ben, doubtedly, and then at the stuff Ben had brought along with him. Some boards, scrounged from Mr. McKibben's backyard. But that was okay, since Mr. McKibben had probably scavenged them from someone else's. A sledgehammer, a shovel. I don't know, Eddie said, glancing at Bill. When we tried yesterday, it didn't work very good. The current kept washing our sticks away. This'll work, Ben said. He also looked at Bill for the final decision. Well, let's give it a try, Bill said. I called Richie Tozier this morning. He's gonna be over later, he said. Maybe him and Stanley who will want to help. Stanley who? Ben asked. Eurus, Eddie said. He was still looking cautiously at Bill, who seemed somehow different today. Quieter, less enthusiastic about the idea of the dam. Bill looked pale today. Distant. Stanley Eurus? I guess I don't know him. Let's go to Derry Elementary. I can't stop smiling. He's our age, but he just finished the 4th grade, Eddie said. He started school a year late because he was sick a lot when he was a little kid. You think you took some Chong? Wait, no. You think you took Chong? What's Chong? Think you took Chong yesterday? You just ought to be glad you're not Stan. Someone's always racking Stan to the dogs and back. He's Jewish, Bill said. But lots of kids don't like him because he's Jewish. Oh, yeah? Ben asked, impressed. Jewish, huh? He paused and then said carefully, Is that like being Turkish, or is it more like, Egyptian? I guess it's more like Turkish, Bill said. He picked up one of the boards Ben had brought along and looked at it. It was about 6 feet long and 3 feet wide. My dad says Jews have big noses and lots of money, but Stan's got a regular nose and always broke, Eddie said. Yeah, Bill said, and broke into a real grin for the first time that day. Ben grinned, Eddie grinned. Bill tossed the board aside, got up, and brushed off the seat of his jeans. He walked to the edge of the stream, and the other 2 boys joined him. Bill shoved his hands in his back pockets and sighed deeply. Eddie was sure Bill was going to say something serious. He looked from Eddie to Ben and then back to Eddie again, not smiling now. Eddie was suddenly afraid. But all Bill said then was, Got your aspirator, Eddie? Eddie slapped his pocket. I'm loaded for beer. For bear. It doesn't say beer, it says bear. Say, how'd it work with the chocolate milk? Ben asked. Eddie laughed. Worked great, he said. He and Ben broke up while Bill looked at them, smiling but puzzled. Eddie explained and Bill nodded, grinned again. Eddie's mom is worried that he's gonna break and she won't be able to get a refund. Eddie snorted and made as if to push him into the stream. Watch it, fuckface, Bill said, sounding uncannily like Henry Bowers. I'll twist your head so far around you'll be able to watch when you wipe yourself. Ben collapsed, shrieking with laughter. Bill glanced at him, still smiling, hands still in the back pockets of his jeans, smiling. Yeah, but a little distant again, a little vague. He looked at Eddie and then cocked his head towards Ben. Kid's soft, he said. Yeah, Eddie agreed. But he felt somehow that they were only going through the motions of having a good time. Something was on Bill's mind. He supposed Bill would spill when he was ready. The question was, did Eddie want to hear what it was? Kids mentally R-worded. R-worded, Ben said, still giggling. You gonna show us how to build the dam, or are you gonna sit on your big can all day? Ben got to his feet again. He looked first at the stream, flowing past them at a moderate speed. The Kenduskeag was terribly wide this far up in the barrens, but it had defeated them yesterday just the same. Neither Eddie nor Bill had been able to figure out how to get a foothold on the current, but Ben was smiling. The smile of one who contemplates doing something new, something that will be fun, but not very hard. Eddie thought, he knows how. I really think he does. Okay, he said. You guys want to take your shoes off because we're going to get your little footsies wet. The mind mother in Eddie's head spoke up at once, her voice stern and commanding as the voice of a traffic cop. "Don't you dare do it, Eddie! Don't you dare! Wet feet, that's one way, one of thousands of ways that colds start. And colds leads to pneumonia, so don't you do it." Bill and Ben were sitting on the bank, pulling off their sneakers and socks. Ben was fussily rolling up the legs of his jeans. Bill looked up at Eddie. His eyes were clear and warm and sympathetic. Eddie was suddenly sure Big Bill knew exactly what he had been thinking, and he was ashamed. "You comin'?" "Yeah, sure," Eddie said. He sat down on the bank and undressed his feet while his mother ranted inside his head. But her voice was growing steadily more distant and echoey. He was relieved to note, as if someone had struck a heavy fish hook through the back of her blouse and was now reeling her away from him down a very long corridor. 3. It was one of those perfect summer days which, in a world where everything was on track and on the beam, he would never forget. A moderate breeze kept the worst of the mosquitoes and black flies away. The sky was a bright, crisp blue. Temperatures were in the low 70s. Birds sang about their birdie business in the bushes and second-grown trees. Eddie had used his aspirator once, and then his chest lightened and his throat seemed to widen magically to the size of a freeway. He spent the rest of the morning with it stuffed forgotten into his back pocket. Ben Hanscom, who had seemed so timid and unsure the day before, became a confident general once he was fully involved in the actual construction of the dam. Every now and then he would climb the bank and stand there with his muddy hands on his hips, looking at the work in progress and muttering to himself. Sometimes he would run a hand through his hair, and by 11 o'clock it was standing up in crazy comical spikes. Eddie felt uncertainty at first, then a sense of glee, and finally an entirely new feeling, one that was at the same time weird, terrifying, and exhilarating. It was a feeling so alien to his usual state of being that he was not able to put a name to it until that night, lying in bed, looking at the ceiling and replaying the day. Power. That was what the feeling had been. Power. It was going to work by God, and it was going to work better than he and Bill, maybe even Ben himself, had dreamed it could. It was going to work? Did I say that? Yeah. He could see Bill getting involved too, only a little at first, still mulling over what it was he had on his mind, and then bit by bit committing himself fully. Once or twice he clapped Ben on one meaty shoulder and told him he was unbelievable. Ben flushed with pleasure each time. Ben got Eddie and Bill to set one of the boards across the stream and hold it as he used the sledgehammer to seat it in the stream bed. "There. It's in, but you'll have to hold it or the current will just pull it loose," he told Eddie. So Eddie stood in the middle of the stream holding the board while water sluiced over its top and made his hands into wavering starfish shapes. Is it sluiced or sluiced? The word from Putnam. Sluiced? Sluiced.
I think it's sluiced.
Sluiced? Okay. That was a word in a play that I was in, a spelling bee play. And I was in it twice. And one time we pronounced it as sluiced, and the other time we pronounced it as sluiced. So I don't remember. Sluiced? Okay, sluiced. Sluiced over its top.
It's definitely sluiced.
Ben and Bill located a second board 2 feet downstream of the first. Ben used the sledge again to seat it, and Bill held it while Ben began to fill up the space between the 2 boards with sandy earth from the stream bank. At first, it only washed away around the ends of the boards in gritty clouds, and Eddie didn't think it was going to work at all. But when Ben began adding rocks and muddy gook from the stream bed, the clouds of escaping silt began to diminish. In less than 20 minutes, he had created a heaped brown canal of earth and stones between the 2 boards in the middle of the stream. To Eddie, it looked like an optical illusion. If we had real cement instead of just mud and rocks, they'd have to move to a whole city, over to the old Cape side by the middle of next week, Ben said, slinging the shovel aside at last and sitting on the bank until he got his breath back. Bill and Eddie laughed, and Ben grinned at them. When he grinned, there was a ghost of the handsome man he would soon become in the lines of his face. Water had begun to pile up behind the upstream board now. Eddie asked what they were going to do about the water scraping around the sides. "Let it go. Doesn't matter." "It doesn't?" "Nope." "Why not?" "I can't explain exactly. We gotta let some out, though." "How do you know?" Ben shrugged. "I just do," the shrug said, and Eddie was silenced. When he rested, Ben got a third board, the thickest of the 4 or 5 he had carried laboriously across down to the barrens, and placed it carefully against the downstream board, wedging one end firmly into the stream bed and socking the other against the board Bill had been holding, creating the strut he had put in the little drawing the day before. "Okay," he said, standing back. He grinned at them. You guys should be able to let go now. The cooking between the two boards will take most of the water pressure away. The strut will take the rest. Won't the water wash it away? Eddie asked. Nope. The water's just going to push it deeper. If you're wrong, we get to kill you, Bill said. That's cool, Ben said amiably. Bill and Eddie stepped back. The two boards that formed the basis of the dam creaked a little, tilted a little, and that was all. Hot shit! Eddie screamed, excited. It's great, Bill said, grinning. Yeah, Ben said. Let's eat. Ugh. Ooh, Sluice is here again. Sluice, not Sluice. Sluice.
One of the cabins at camp is called Sluice Way.
Oh.
Yeah, it's the same.
Yeah.
That's Sluice. That's how I recognize it.
Sluice. S-L-U-I-C-E, Sluice. Oh, no. Sleuth. S-L-U-I-C-E, Sleuth. Sorry. Okay. 4. They sat on the bank and ate, not talking much, watching the water stack up behind the dam and sluice around the ends of the boards. They'd already done something to the geography of the stream banks, Eddie saw. The diverted current was cutting scalloped hollows into them. As he watched, the new course of the stream undercut the bank enough on the far side to cause a small avalanche. Upstream of the dam, the water formed a roughly circular pool, and at one place it actually overflowed the bank. Bright, reflecting rills ran off into the grass and the underbrush. Eddie slowly began to realize what Ben had known from the first. The dam was already built. The gaps between the boards and the banks were sluiceways. Ben had not been able to tell Eddie this because he did not know the word. Above the boards, the cascade had taken on the swelled look. The chuckling sound of the shallow water babbling its way over stones and gravel was now gone. All the stones upstream of the dam were under water. Every now and then, more sod and dirt, undercut by the winding stream, would fall into the water with a splash. Downstream of the dam, the water course was nearly empty. Thin trickles ran restlessly down the current, and that was all. Stones which had been underwater for God knows how long were drying in the sun. Eddie looked at these drying stones with mild wonder, and that weird other feeling. They had done this. He saw a frog hopping along and thought maybe old Mr. Froggy was wondering just where the water had gone. Eddie laughed out loud. Ben was nearly stowing his empty wrappers in the lunch bag he had brought. Oh, Ben was neatly. Yeah. Both Eddie and Bill had been amazed by the size of the repast. Ben had laid out with business-like efficiency. 2 PB&J sandwiches, 1 bologna sandwich, a hard-cooked egg, complete with a pinch of salt twisted up in a small piece of wax paper, 2 fig bars, 3 large chocolate chip cookies, and a ring ding. What did your ma say when she saw how bad you got racked? Eddie asked. Hmm? Ben looked up from the spreading pool of water behind the dam and belched gently against the back of his hand. Oh, well, I knew she'd been grocery shopping yesterday afternoon, so I was able to beat her home. I took a bath and washed my hair. Then I threw away the jeans and the sweatshirt I was wearing. I don't know if she'll notice they're gone or not. Probably not the sweatshirt. I got lots of sweatshirts. But I guess I had to buy myself a new pair of jeans before she gets nosing through my drawers. I didn't know nosing was a word. The thought of wasting his money on such a non-essential item cast a momentary gloom across Ben's face. What about the way you were bruised up? I told her I was so excited to be out of school that I ran out to the door and fell down the steps, Ben said, and looked both amazed and a little hurt when Eddie and Bill began laughing. Bill, who had been chewing up a piece of his mother's devil foods cake, blew out a brown jet of crumbs and had a coughing fit. Eddie, still howling, clapped him on the back. Well, I almost did fall down the steps, Ben said. Only it was because Victor Chris pushed me, not because I was running. I'd be hot as a tamale in a sweatshirt like that, Bill said, finishing the last bite of his cake. Ben hesitated for a moment. Bill hesitated. For a moment, it seemed like he would say nothing. It's better when you're fat, he said finally. Sweatshirts, I mean. Because of your gut? Eddie asked. Bill snorted. Because of your yeah, my tits, so what? Yeah, Bill said mildly. So what? There was a moment of awkward silence, then Eddie said, "Look how dark the water's getting when it goes around the side of the dam." "Oh, cripes. Is that how you say it? Is it cripes?" Okay. "Oh, cripes." I don't know if it was crepes, but I figured it wasn't. Or cripes. "Oh, cripes." Ben shot to his feet. "Current's pulling out the fill. Geez, I wish we had cement." The damage was quickly repaired, but even Eddie could see what would happen if that's without someone there to almost constantly shovel in fresh fill. Erosion would eventually cause the upstream board to collapse against the downstream board, and everything would fall over. Did they want to build a permanent dam? They're 11.
Yeah.
It's stupid. If we use sand and mud, won't it go into the washing way? Eddie asked. We'll use chunks of sod. Bill nodded, smiled, and made an O with the thumb and forefinger of his right hand. Let's go. I'll dig 'em, and you show me where to put 'em in, Big Ben. From behind them, a stridently cheery voice called out, "My God! Someone put a Y pool down in the Barrens, belly button, lint, and all!" Eddie turned, noticing the way Ben tightened up at the sound of a strange voice, the way his lips thinned. Standing above them and always upstream on the path Ben had crossed the day before were Richie Tozier and Stanley Harris. Richie came bopping down to the stream, glanced at Ben with some interest, then pinched Eddie's cheek. "Don't do that! I hate it when you do that, Richie." "Ah, you love it, Eds," Richie said and beamed at him. "So what do you say? Having any good checks or what?" And they're here. Yeah, the gang's together. Okay, part 5. Or just 5. I haven't been saying part. The 5 of them knocked off around 4 o'clock. They sat much higher on the bank, the place where Bill, Eddie, and Ben had eaten lunch. No, the place where Bill, Ben, and Eddie had eaten lunch was now underwater, and stared down at their handiwork. Even Ben found it a little difficult to believe. He felt a sense of tired accomplishment, which was mixed with uneasy fright. He found himself thinking of Fantasia, how Mickey Mouse had known enough to get the broom started, but not enough to make them stop. "Fucking incredible," Richie Tozier said softly and pushed his glasses up his nose. Eddie glanced over to him. "Did you just laugh because I pushed mine up?" "Yeah, because I heard push glass with the nose and I went, I should do that too." "Thanks." Eddie glanced over to him and Eddie glanced over at him, but Richie was not doing one of his numbers now. His face was thoughtful, almost solemn. On the far side of the stream, where the land first rose and then tilted shallowly downhill, they had created a new piece of bogland. Bracken and holy bushes stood in front of the water, in a foot of water. Even as they sat here, they could see the bog sending out fresh sodopods, spreading steadily westward. Behind the dam, the Kenduskeag, shallow and harmless just this morning, had become a still, swollen band of water. By 2 o'clock, the winding pool behind the dam had taken so much embankment that the spillways had grown almost to the size of rivers themselves. Everyone but Ben had gone on an emergency expedition to the dump in search of more materials. Ben stuck around, methodically sodding up leaks. What do you think went into the dumpster? Or was it no, it might not have been dumpster. They just said dump. Never mind. Stop talking. Just read it. The scavengers had returned not only with boards, but with 4 ball tires, the rusty door of a 1949 Hudson Hornet. Like in cars! Okay, I need to stop talking, but that's really cool! Oh my god. Oh, they found him.
Oh no.
Oh no. What if Pennywise turned into a character from Cars? Can you imagine Lightning McQueen coming towards you? Oh no. Okay. They're like fighting him in the sewers at the end of the movie, and he turns into like each of their individual fears and turns into Lightning McQueen, and then they're all just like, whose fear is that?
The lights are so bright.
Okay, I'll shut up now. Alright. Under Ben's leadership, they had built 2 wings on the original dam, blocking off the water's escape around the sides again, and with the wings racked back at an angle against the current, the dam worked even better than before. "Stop that sucker cold," Richie said. "You're a genius, man." Ben smiled. "It's not so much." "I got some Winston's," Richie said. "Who wants one?" He produced the crumpled red and white pack from his pants pocket and passed it around. Eddie, thinking of the hell a cigarette would raise with his asthma, refused. Stan also refused. Bill took one, and after a moment's thought, Ben took one too. Richie produced a book of matches with the words Roy Tan on the outside, and lit first Ben's cigarette, then Bill's. He let slide his own when Bill blew out the match. Thanks a lot, Denbro, you wet, Richie said. That's rude. Bill smiled apologetically. The oh, th- three on a match. Bad luck, he said. Bad luck for your folks when you were born, Richie said, and lit a cigarette with another match. He lay down and crossed his arms beneath his head. The cigarette jutted upward between his teeth. Winston tastes good, like a cigarette should. He turned his head slightly and winked at Eddie. Ain't that right, Eds? Ben, Eddie saw, was looking at Richie with a mixture of awe and awareness. Oh no, and wariness. Eddie could understand that. He'd known Richie Tozier for 4 years, and he still didn't really understand what Richie was about. He knew that Richie got A's and B's in his schoolwork, but he also knew that Richie regularly got C's and D's in deportment. His father really racked him about it, and his mother just cried every time Richie brought home those poor conduct grades. And Richie would swear to do better. Maybe even he would, for a quarter or two. Trouble with Richie was that he couldn't keep still for more than a minute at a time, and he couldn't keep his mouth shut at all. Down here in the Barrens, that didn't get him in much trouble, but the Barrens weren't Never Never Land, and they couldn't be the Wild Boys for more than a few hours at a stretch. The idea of a wild boy with an aspirin in his back pocket made Eddie smile. The trouble with the Barrens was that he always had to leave. Out there in the wider world, Richie's bullshit was always getting him in trouble. With adults, which is bad. With guys like Henry Bowers, which is even worse. His entrance earlier today was a perfect example. Ben Hanscom had no more than started to say hi when Richie had fallen on his knees at Ben's feet. He began a series of dramatic salams, his arms outstretched, his hands flopping against the muddy bank every time he bowed. At the same time, he had begun to speak in one of his voices. Richie had about a dozen different voices. His ambition, he had told Eddie one rainy afternoon when they were in the little raftered room over the Casbah garage, reading Little Lulu comic books, was to become the world's greatest ventriloquist. He was going to be even greater than Edgar Bergen, he said. He would be on the Ed Sullivan Show every week. Oh, he never became a ventriloquist. A ventriloquist. That's sad. Aw. I wonder if he ever got a puppet. Aw. Okay. Eddie admired his ambition, but foresaw problems with this. First, all of Richie's voices sounded pretty much like Richie Tozier. This is not to say that Richie could not be funny from time to time. He could be. When referring to verbal zingers and loud farts, Richie's terminology was the same. He called it getting off a good one, and he got off good ones of both types frequently. Usually in inappropriate company, however. Second, when Richie did ventriloquism, his lips moved. Not just a little, on the P and B sounds, but a lot, and on all the sounds. Third, when Richie said he was going to throw his voice, it usually didn't go very far. Most of his friends were too kind, or too bemused with Richie's sometimes enchanting, often exhausting charm, to mention these little failings to him. Salaaming frantically in front of the startled and embarrassed Ben Hanscom, Richie was speaking what he called his N-word Jim voice. I don't want to say it in an accent. It's written in an accent, but I don't want to say it in an accent, so I have to decode as I'm going. Locks a mussy. It's Speak Haystack, Richie screamed. Don't fall on me, Mr. Haystack, sir. You... you're going to cream me if you do. Loxamussy. I don't know what that is. 300 pounds of swinging meat, 88 inches from tit to tit. Haystack bees smiling. Haystack smiling. Just like a loader. Oh, what does that say? Load of panther shit? I'm going to... I don't know what this is saying. I'm done talking. I don't know what it's saying. That.
Getting with the leader in the rain, Mr. Haystack.
Right. Oh yeah, Mr. Haystack, sir.
Getting wetter.
Getting wetter. Oh, with the rain, Mr. Haystack, sir. I'm sure enough getting wetter. Just don't you be falling on this here black boy. Yeah. Got it. Geez, Stephen King, you make things easy for us. Don't worry, Bill said. It's just Richie. He's crazy. Richie bounced to his feet. I heard that, Dembro. You better leave me alone, or I'll stick haystack here on you. But best part of you ran down your father's leg. Bill said. I don't know how to talk in like an actual tone of voice for Bill. Everything's just really like monotone. But I think that's fun. True, Richie said. But look how much good stuff was left. How you doing, Haystack? Richie Tozier is my name. Doing voices is my game. Richie Tozier is my name. Sorry. He popped his hand out. Thoroughly confused, Ben reached for it. Richie pulled his hand back. Ben blinked. Relenting, Richie shook. My name's Ben Hanscom, in case you're interested, Ben said. Seen you around school, Richie said. He slipped a hand at the spreading pool of water. This must have been your idea. These wet ends couldn't like a firecracker with a flamethrower. Speak for yourself, Eddie said. Oh, you mean it was your idea, Eds? Jesus, I'm sorry. He fell down in front of Eddie and began salaaming wildly again. Get up, stop it, you're splattering mud on me, Eddie cried. Richie jumped to his feet a second time and pinched Eddie's cheek. Cute, 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 Richie exclaimed. Stop it, I hate that. Fess up, Eds. Who built the dam? But Ben showed us, Bill said. Good deal. Richie turned and discovered Stanley Ura standing behind him, hands in his pockets, watching quietly as Richie put on his show. This here Stan the man Urus, Richie told Ben. Stan's a Jew. Also, he killed Christ. At least that's what Victor Chris told me one day. I've been after Stan ever since. I figured if he's that old, he'd ought to be able to buy us some beer. Right, Stan? I think that must have been my father, Stan said in a slow, pleasant voice Stan said in a low, pleasant voice, and that broke them all up, Ben included. Eddie laughed until he was wheezing and tears were running down his face. A good one! Richie cried, striding around with his arms thrown up over his head like a football referee signaling that the extra point was good. Stan the man gets off a good one! Great moments in history! Yowza, yowza, yowza! Hi, Stan said to Ben, seeming to take no notice of Richie at all. Hello, Ben replied. We were in the same class in second grade. You were the kid who never said anything. Stan finished, smiling a little. Right. Second thought, though, when earlier when Ben says, who's Stanley Urus, Bill and Eddie say that he was held back he's a grade below them, but they were in the same second grade class.
Maybe he was held back.
No, he started school a year late. He started school a year late. He started school a year late because he was sick when he was a little kid. So how are they in the same second grade class? And how does Ben not know him, but like when he thinks about it a little harder, he does actually remember them? I don't understand it. Consistency, Mr. King. Consistency. You should go to his house and yell, consistency. Stan wouldn't say shit if he had a mouthful, Richie said. Which he frequently does. Yowza, yowza, yeah. Just shut up, Richie, Bill said. Okay, but first I tell you one more thing. Much as I hate to. I think you're losing your dam. Valley's gonna flood, partners. Look at the women and children out first. And without bothering to fold up his pants or even to remove his sneakers, Richie jumped into the water and began to slam sods into place on the near side wing of the dam, where the persistent current was pulling fill out of muddy streamers again. A piece of Red Cross adhesive tape was wrapped around one of the bows of his glasses. Bows of his glasses, and the loose end flapped against his cheekbone as he worked. Bill caught Eddie's eye, smiled a little, and shrugged. It was just Richie. Could drive you bug shit, but it was still sort of nice to have him around. Sort of. It was still sort of nice to have him around. He worked on the dam for the next hour or so. Richie took Ben's commands, which had become rather tentative again, with 2 more kids to general, with perfect willingness, and fulfilled them back at a manic pace. When each mission was completed, he reported back to Ben for further orders, exuding a backhand British salute and snapping the soggy heels of his sneakers together. Every now and then he would begin to harangue the others in one of his voices. The German commandant, Toodles the English butler, the Southern senator, who sounded quite a bit like the foghorn leghorn, who would, in the fullness of time, evolve into a character named Buford Kistrivel, and movie tone newsreel narrator. The work did not just go forward, it sprinted forward. And now, shortly before 5 o'clock, as they sat resting on the bank, it seemed that what Richie had said was true. They had stopped the sucker cold. The car door, the piece of corrugated steel, and the old tires had become the second stage of the dam. It was backstopped by a huge sloping hill of earth and stones. Bill, Ben, and Richie smoked. Stan was lying on his back. A stranger might have thought he was just looking up at the sky, but Eddie knew better. Stan was looking into the trees on the other side of the stream, keeping an eye out for a bird or two he could write up about in his bird notebook that night. Eddie himself just sat cross-legged, feeling pleasantly tired and rather mellow. At that moment, the other seemed to him like the greatest bunch of guys to chum with a fellow could ever hope to have. They felt right together. They fitted neatly against each other's edges. He couldn't explain to himself any better than that, and since it didn't really seem to need explaining, he decided he ought to just let it be. He's saying that they're like perfect together, the five of them, right? But they're missing two people. But they end up defeating Pennywise. It's just five of them. He looked over at Ben, who was holding his half-smoked cigarette clumsily and spitting frequently, as if he didn't like the taste of it much. As Eddie watched, Ben stubbed it out and covered the long butt with dirt. Ben looked up, saw Eddie watching him, and looked away embarrassed. Eddie glanced at Bill and saw something on Bill's face that he didn't like. Bill was looking across the water and into the trees and bushes on the far side, his eyes gray and thoughtful. That brooding expression was back on his face. Eddie thought Bill looked almost haunted. As if reading his thought, Bill looked around at him. Eddie smiled, but Bill didn't smile back. He put his cigarette out and looked at the others. Even Richie had withdrawn into the silence of his own thoughts, an event which occurred about as seldom as a lunar eclipse. Eddie knew that Bill rarely said anything important unless it was perfectly quiet, because it was hard for him to speak. And he suddenly wished he had something to say, or that Richie would start in with one of his voices. He was suddenly sure Bill was going to open his mouth and say something terrible, something which would change everything. Eddie reached automatically for his aspirator, pulled it out of his back pocket, and held it in his hands. Did this without even thinking about it. You can hear my laptop wanting to overheat. Got it. Okay, I'm gonna sit up too. Sorry, no, you were laying down, but I'm gonna sit up.
Do you want to get against the wall?
No.
You sure?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do it just so I can see better. You gonna paint your nails?
No, because I'm tired. I want to do a good job.
Well, can I tell you guys something? Bill asked. They all looked at him. Crack a joke, Richie, Eddie thought. Crack a joke. Say something outrageous. Embarrass him. I don't care. Just shut him up. Whatever it is, I don't want to hear it. No one thinks a change. I don't want to be scared. In his mind, a tenebrous, croaking voice whispered, I'll do it for a dime. Eddie shuddered and tried to unthink that voice, and the sudden image it called up in his mind, House on Nebolt, its front yard overgrown with weeds, gigantic sunflowers, nodding into the untended garden off to one side. Sure, Big Bill, Richie said. What's up? Bill opened his mouth, more anxiety on Eddie's part, closed it, less relief for Eddie, but opened it again, renewed anxiety. If you guys laugh, I'll never hang around with you again, Bill said. It's crazy, but I swear I'm not making it up. It really happened. We won't laugh, Ben said. Looked around at the others. Will we? Stan shook his head. So did Richie. Eddie wanted to say, Yes, we will too, Billy. We'll laugh our heads off and say you're really stupid, so why don't you shut up right now? But of course, he could not say any such thing. This was, after all, Big Bill. He shook his head miserably. No, he wouldn't laugh. He never felt less like laughing in his life. They sat there. My strings are uneven. They sat there above the dam, then it showed them how to make, looking from Bill's face, the expanding pool, and the likewise expanding bog beyond it, then back to Bill's face again, listening silently as he told them about what had happened when he opened George's photograph album, how Georgie's school photograph had turned its head and winked at him, how the book had bled when he threw it across the room. It was a long, painful recital, and by the time he finished, Bill was red-faced and sweating, and he had never seen him stutter so badly. At last, though, the tale was told. Bill looked around at them, both defiant and afraid, and he saw an identical expression on the faces of Ben, Richie, and Stan. It was solemn, odd fear. It was not in the slightest tinctured, I don't know, by disbelief. An urge came to him then, an urge to spring to his feet and shout, "What a crazy story! You don't believe that crazy story, do you? And even if you do, you don't believe we believe it, do you? School pictures can't wink, books can't bleed, you're out of your mind, Big Bill." But he couldn't very well do so, because that expression of solemn fear was also on his own face. He couldn't see it, but he could feel it. "Come back here, kid," the hoarse voice whispered. "I'll blow you for free. Come back here." "No," Eddie moaned at it. "Please go away. I don't want to think about that. Come back here, kid." Now Eddie saw something else. Not on Richie's face, at least he didn't think so, but on Stan's and Ben's for sure. He knew what that was. He knew what that something was. Knew because that expression was on his own face too. Recognition. "I'll blow you for free." The house at 29 Neibolt Street was just outside the dairy train yards. It was old and boarded up, its porch gradually sinking back into the ground, its lawn an overgrown field. An old trike, rusting and overturned, hid in that long grass, one wheel sticking up at an angle. But on the left side of the porch there was a huge bald patch in the lawn, and you could see the dirty cellar windows set into the house's crumbling brick foundation. It was in one of those windows that Eddie Casbrack first saw the face of the leper 6 weeks ago. What number is Stephen King's house? Not 29.
I'll look it up.
Probably not 29.
$47.
Disappointing. I wonder if there is a book, though, or a house in a book, that's his phone, that's his house address. I can't talk. That is his house number. Yeah. Anyways, 6. On Saturdays, when Eddie could find no one to play with him, he often went down to the train yards. No real reason, he just liked to go out there. He would ride his back out Witcham Street and then cut to the northwest along Route 2 where it crossed Witcham. The Neibolt Street Church stood on the corner of Route 2 and Neibolt Street a mile or so farther on. It was a shabby, neat, wood-frame building with a large cross on top and the words "Suffer the little children to come on to me" written over the front door in gilt letters 2 feet high. Sometimes on Saturdays, Eddie heard music and singing coming from inside. It was gospel music, but whoever was playing the piano sounded more like Jerry Lee Lewis than a regular church piano player. The singing didn't sound very religious to Eddie either, although there was lots of stuff in it about beautiful Zion and being washed in the blood of the Lamb, and what a friend we have in Jesus. People singing seemed to be having much too good of a time for it to be really sacred singing, in Eddie's opinion. But he liked the sound of it all the same, the way he liked to hear Jerry Lee hawing out. Whole lot of shaking going on. Sometimes he would stop for a while across the street, leaning his bike against a tree and pretending to read on the grass, actually jiving along to the music. Other Saturdays, the church school would be shut up and silent, and he would ride out to the train yard without stopping, out to where Neibolt Street ended in a parking lot with weeds growing up through the cracks of the asphalt. There he would lean his bike against the wooden fence and watch the trains go by. There were a lot of them on Saturdays. His mother told him that in the old days you could catch a GS and WM passenger train at what was then Neibolt Street Station, but the passenger trains had stopped running around the time the Korean War was starting up. If you got on the northbound train, you went to Brownsville Station. Brownsville isn't the name of the town in... I'm not okay with this. Yeah, it is. Okay, she said. And from Brownsville, you could catch a train that would take you all the way across Canada if you wanted to, all the way to the Pacific. The southbound train would take you to Portland and then on down to Boston, and the south station to the country was yours. But the passenger trains have gone... It is Brownsville? But the passenger trains have gone to the trolley lines now, I guess. No one wants to ride a train when they can just jump in a Ford and go. You may never even ride one. But great long freights. But great long freights still came through Derry. They headed to the south loaded with pulpwood, paper, and potatoes, north with manufactured goods for towns of what Maine people like to call the Big Northern: Bangor, Millinocket, Machias, Presque Isle, Holton. Eddie particularly liked to watch the northbound car carriers with their loads of gleaming Fords and Chevys. "I'll make a car like one of those someday," he promised himself. Like one of those, or even better, maybe even a Cadillac. There were 6 tracks in all, swooping into the station like strands of cobweb tending toward the center. Bangor Great Northern lines from the north, and the Great Southern and Western Maine from the west, the Boston Maine from the south, the Southern Seacoast from the east. You need to look at this one closer. One day, 2 days before, Eddie had been standing near the latter line and watching a train go through. A drunken trainman had thrown a crate at a slow-moving boxcar at him. Eddie ducked and flinched backward. Along the crate landed in the cinders 10 feet away. Although the crate landed in the cinders 10 feet away, there were things inside of it, live things that clicked and moved. "Last run, boy!" the drunken trainman shouted. Jeez. He pulled a flat brown bottle from one of the pockets of his denim jacket, tipped it up, drank, then flipped it to the cinders where it smashed. Trainman pointed at the crate. "Take him home to your mom. Compliments of the Southern fucking Seacoast bound for welfare line." He reeled forward to shout those last words as the train pulled away, gathering for speed now. And for one alarming moment, Eddie thought he was going to tumble right out. When the train was gone, Eddie went to the box and bent cautiously over it. He was afraid to get too close. The things inside were slithery and crawly. If the trainman had yelled that they were for him, Eddie would have left them right there. But it said, "Take him home to your mom." And like Ben, when someone said mom, Eddie jumped. He scrounged a hank of rope from one of the empty Quonset warehouses and tied the crate into the package carrier of his bike. His mother had peered inside the crate even more warily than when Eddie himself, and then she screamed, but with delight rather than with terror. There were 4 lobsters in the crate, big 2-pounders with their claws pegged. She cooked them for supper and had been extremely grumpy when Eddie wouldn't eat any. "What do you think the Rockefellers were eating this evening at their place in Bar Harbor?" she asked indignantly. "What do you think the swells are eating at 21 Sardi's in New York City? Peanut butter and jelly sandwiches? They're eating lobster, Eddie, same as we are. Now come on, give it a try." I wanted to say that in the accent. "You're eating lobster, Eddie." "Come on and give it a try." Eddie could, but Eddie wouldn't. At least that was what his mother said. Maybe it was true, but inside it felt more to Eddie like couldn't than wouldn't. Kept thinking of the way they had slithered inside the crate and the clicking sounds their claws had made. She kept telling him of how delicious they were and what a treat he was missing until he started to gasp for breath and had to use his aspirator. Then she left him alone. Eddie retreated to his room and read. His mother called up her friend Eleanor Denton. Eleanor came over and the two of them read old copies of Photoplay and Screen Secrets and giggled over the gossip columns and gorged themselves on cold lobster salad. When Eddie got up for school the next morning, his mother was still in bed, snoring away and letting out frequent farts that sounded like long, mellow cornet notes. She was getting off some good ones, Richie would have said. There was nothing left in the bowl where the lobster salad had been except for a few tiny blots of mayonnaise. That was the last Southern Seacoast train Eddie ever saw, and when he later saw Mr. Braddock, the dairy trainmaster, he asked him hesitantly what had happened. "Company went broke," Mr. Braddock said. "That's all there was to it. Don't you read the papers? It's happening all over the damn country. Now get out of here. This ain't no place for a kid." After that, Eddie would sometimes walk around Track 4, which had been the Southern Seacoast track, and listened as a mental conductor chanted names inside his head, reeling them off in a lovely down east monotone. Those names, those magic names: Camden, Rockland, Bar Harbor, pronounced Bar Harbor, Wiscasset, Bath, Portland, Agunquit. What?
Agunquit.
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 Yeah.
Agunquit. The barracks. Okay. He would walk down Track 4 heading east until he got tired, and the weeds growing up between the crossed ties had made him feel sad. Once he looked up and seen seagulls, probably just fat old dump gulls? Yeah. Wouldn't give a shit if they ever saw the ocean, but that had not occurred to him then, wheeling and crying overhead, and the sound of their voices made him cry a little too. This is Stephen King's problem. He writes too much about nothing. Nothing's happening right now, but we just have to read it because it's happening, but it's not happening. So buckle yourselves in. We still have 11 pages to go. It's all 20 more minutes left of this read. Because this stupid stuff. There had once been a gate at the entrance of the train yards, but it had blown over in a windstorm and no one had bothered to replace it. Eddie came and went pretty much as he liked, although Mr. Braddock would kick him out if he ever saw him, or any kid for that matter. There were truck drivers who would chase you sometimes, but not very far, because they thought you were hanging around just so you could hawk something. Sometimes kids did. Mostly, though, the place was quiet. There was a guard booth, but it was empty, its glass windows broken by stones. There had been no full-time security since 1950 or so. Mr. Braddock shooed the kids away by day, and a night watchman drove through 4 or 5 times a night in an old Studebaker, with a searchlight mounted outside the vent window, and that was all. There were tramps and hobos sometimes, though. If anything about the train yard scared Eddie, they did. Then unshaven cheeks and cracked skin and blisters on their hands and cold sores on their lips. That's a leopard. They rode the rails for a while and then climbed down for a while and spent some time in Derry, and then got on another train and went somewhere else. Sometimes they had missing fingers. Usually they were drunk and wanted to know if you had a cigarette. One of these fellows had crawled out under the porch of the house at 29 Neville Street one day and had offered to give Eddie a blowjob for a quarter. Eddie had backed away, his skin like ice, his mouth as dry as lint balls. One of the hobo's nostrils had been eaten away. He could look right into the red, scabby channel. I don't have a quarter, Eddie said, backing toward his bike. I'll do it for a dime, the hobo croaked, coming toward him. He was wearing old green flannel pants. Yellow puke was stiffening across his lap. He unzipped his fly and reached inside. He was trying to grin. His nose was a red horror. I don't have a dime either, Eddie said, and suddenly he thought, oh my God, he got leprosy. If he touches me, I'll catch it too. His control snapped and he ran. He heard the hobo break in a shuffling run behind him, his old string-tied shoes slapping and flapping across the riotous lawn of the empty saltbox house. Come back here, kid! I'll blow you for free! Come back here! Eddie had leaped onto his bike, wheezing now, feeling his throat closing up to a pinhole. His chest had taken on weight. He hit the pedals and was just picking up speed when one of the hobo's hands struck the package carrier. The bike shimmied. Eddie looked over his shoulder and saw the hobo running along behind the rear wheel, gaining. His lips drawn back from the black stumps of his teeth in an expression which might have been either desperation or fury. In spite of the stones lying on his chest, Eddie had pedaled even faster, expecting that one of the hobo's scab-crusted hands would close over his arm at any moment, pulling him from his rally, and dumping him into the ditch, where God knew what would happen to him. He didn't dare to look around till he had flashed past the church school and through the Route 2 intersection. The boat was gone. Eddie held this terrible story inside him for almost a week, and then confided it to Richie Tozier and Bill Denver one day when they were reading comics over the garage. Didn't have leprosy, you dummy, Richie said. He had the sif. Eddie looked at Bill to see if Richie was ribbing him. He had never heard of a disease called the sift before. The sift. It sounded like something Richie might have made up. Is there such thing as the sift, Bill? Bill nodded gravely. Only it's the sif, not the sift. It's just short for syphilis. What's that? It's a disease you get from fucking, Richie said. You know about fucking, don't you, Eds? Sure, Eddie said. He hoped he wasn't blushing. He knew that when you got older, stuff came out of your penis when it was hard. Vincent Boogers Taliendo had filled him in on the rest one day at school. Oh, I don't want to read this part. What you did when you fucked, according to Boogers, was you rubbed your cock against the girl's stomach until it got hard. Your cock, not the girl's stomach. Then you rubbed some more until you started to get the feeling. When Eddie asked what that meant, Boogers had only shaken his head in a mysterious way. Boogers, why is he calling it Boogers? What is his nickname? Boogers said that you couldn't describe it, but you'd know it as soon as you got it. He said you could practice by lying in the bathtub and rubbing your cock with ivory soap. Eddie had tried this, but the only feeling he got afterwards was that he had to urinate after a while. Anyway, Boogers went on, after you got the feeling, this stuff came out of your penis. Most kids called it cum, Booger said, but his brother had told him that the really scientific word for it was jism. Did I say that right? Jism? Because like jizzy. Jizz.
Yeah,
Jism. And when you got the feeling, you had to rub your cock and aim it real fast. You could shoot the jism into the girl's belly button as soon as it came out. It went down into her stomach and made a baby there.
Belly button.
Yeah. Yeah, you know there's a hole in your belly button that leads right to your uterus, yeah. Do girls like that? Eddie had asked Boogers Taliendo. Oh, he must have been really confused later on in the sewers.
Oh, yeah.
I guess they must, Boogers had replied, looking mystified himself. Different thought. Now listen up, Eds, Richie said. There's maybe some questions later. Some women have got this disease, some men too, but mostly it's women. A guy can get it from a woman, or another guy if they're Queer, Bill added. Right. The important thing is when you get the sift from screwing someone who's already got it. No, the important thing is you get the sift from screwing someone who's already got it. What does it do? Eddie asked. Makes you rot, Richie said simply. Eddie stared at him horrified. It's bad, I know, but it's true, Richie said. Your nose is the first to go. Some guys with the sifts, their noses fall right off. Then their cocks. Please, Bill said. I just ate. Hey man, this is science, Richie said. So what's the difference between leprosy and the sif? Eddie asked. You don't get leprosy from fucking, Richie said promptly, and then went into a gale of laughter that left both both Bill and Eddie mystified. I was thinking, what if... No, I'm not going to say that right now. 7. Following that day, the house at 29 Evil Street had taken on the kind of glow that... Following that day, the house at 29 Evil Street had taken on a kind of glow in Eddie's imagination. Looking at its weedy yard and its slumped porch and the boards nailed across its windows, he would feel an unhealthy fascination take hold of him. And 6 weeks ago, he had parked his bike on the gravelly verge of the street. The sidewalk ended 4 houses farther back, and walked across the lawn toward the porch of the house. His heart had began beating hard in his chest, and his mouth had that dry taste again. Listening to Bill's story with that dreadful picture, he knew that what he had felt when approaching the house was about the same as what Bill had felt going into Georgie's room. He did not feel as if he was in control of himself. He felt pushed. It did not seem as if his feet were moving. Instead, the house itself, brooding and silent, seemed to draw closer to where he stood. Faintly, he could hear a diesel engine in the train yard, that and the squid metallic slam of couplings being made. They were shunting some cars into sidings, picking up others, making a train. His hand gripped his aspirator, but oddly his asthma had not closed down as it had the day he had fled from the hobo with the rotten nose. At all. There was only the sense of standing still and watching the house slide and stealthily toward him, as if on a hidden track. Eddie looked under the porch. There was no one there. It was not really surprising. This was spring, and hobos showed up most frequently in Derry from late September to early November. They typically did. During those 6 weeks or so, a man could pick up day work on one of the outlying farms if he looked even half decent. There were potatoes and apples to pick, snow fence to string, barn and shed roofs which needed to be patched before December came along, whistling up winter. No hobos under the porch, but plenty of sign they had been there. Empty beer cans, empty beer bottles, empty liquor bottles. The dirt-crusted blanket lay against the brick foundation like a dead dog. There were drifts of crumpled newspapers and one old shoe, and it smelled like garbage. There were thick layers of old leaves under there. Not wanting to do it, but unable to help himself, Eddie had crawled into the porch. He could feel his heartbeat slamming into his head now, driving white spots of light across his field of vision. The smell was worse underneath, booze and sweat and the dark brown perfume of decaying leaves. The old leaves didn't even crackle under his hands and knees. They and the old newspapers only sighed. I'm a hobo, Eddie thought incoherently. I'm a hobo and I ride the rods. That's what I do. Got no money and got home, but I got me a bottle and $1 and a place to sleep. Pick apples this weekend and potatoes the week after that. When the frost locks up the ground like money inside the bank vault, why, I'll hop a GSNWM box that smells of sugar beets, and I'll sit in the corner and pull some hay over me. If there is some, and I'll drink me a little drink, chew me a little chew. Sooner or later, if it's a Portland or Beantown. And if I don't get busted by a railroad security dick, I'll hop on one of those Bama Star boxes. Head down south when I get there, I'll pick lemons or limes and oranges. And if I get bagged, I'll build roads for the tourists to ride on. Hell, I done it before, ain't I? I'm just a lonesome hobo, ain't got no money, ain't got no home. But I got me one thing. I got me a disease that's eating me up. My skin's cracking open, my teeth are falling out, and you know what? I can feel myself turning like a bad apple that's getting soft. I can feel it happening, eating from the inside into the out. Eating me. Eddie pulled the stiffening blanket aside, tweezing at it with his thumb and forefinger, grimacing at its mad feel. One of those low cellar windows was directly behind it. One pane again, the other opaque with dirt. He leaned forward. Eddie was one of the most afraid because he had an actual experience with an actual person at that house. Like a real life experience, not just a clown. Got it. All right. He leaned forward, now feeling almost hypnotized. He leaned closer to the window, closer to the cellar darkness, breathing in that smell of age and must and dry rot, closer and closer to the black. And surely the leper would have caught him if his asthma hadn't picked that exact moment to kick up. It cramped its lungs with a weight that was painless yet frightening. His breath at once took on a familiar, hasteful whistling sound. He drew back, and that was when the face appeared. Its coming was so sudden, so startling, and yet at the same time so expected that he could have screamed if he hadn't been having another asthma attack. His eyes bulged. His mouth creaked open. It was not the hobo with the flayed nose. There were resemblances. Terrible resemblances. And yet, this thing could not be human. Nothing could be so eaten up and remain alive. The skin of its forehead was split open. White bone, coated with a membrane of yellow mucousy stuff, peered through like the lenses of bleary searchlight. The nose was a bridge of raw gristle above two red flaring channels. One eye was a gleeful blue. The other socket was filled with a mass of spongy brown-black tissue. The leper's lower lip sagged like liver, and no upper lip at all. Its teeth poked up in a sneering ring. It shot one hand out through the broken pane. It shot the other through the dirty glass to the left, shattering to fragments. Its questing, clutching hands crawled with sores. Beetles crawled and lumbered busily to and fro. Mewling, gasping, Eddie hunched his way backward. He could hardly breathe. His heart was a runaway engine in his chest. The leper appeared to be wearing the ragged remains of some strange silvery sloot. Things were crawling in the straggles of its brown hair. How about a blowjob, Eddie? The apparition croaked, grinning with the remains of his mouth. I'm not saying it in a cool voice. How about a blowjob, Eddie? No, got it. No more voice. It lilted. Bobby does it for a dime. He'll do it any time. 50 cents for overtime. It winked. That's me, Eddie. Bob Gray. And now that we've been properly introduced, one of its hands flattered against Eddie's right shoulder. Eddie screamed thinly. That's all right, the leper said, and Eddie saw with dreamlike terror that it was crawling out of the window. The bony shield behind its peeling forward forehead snapped the thin wooden strip between the two planes. Its hands clawed through the leafy, mulchy earth. The silver shoulders of its suit, costume, whatever it was, began to push through the gap. The one glaring blue eye never left Eddie's face. Here I come, Eddie. That's all right, he croaked. You'll like it down here with us. Some of your friends are down here. Its hand reached out again, and in some corner of his panic-maddened, screaming mind, Eddie was suddenly coldly sure that if the thing had touched his bare skin, he'd begin to rot too. The thought broke his paralysis. He skittered backward on his hands and knees and turned and lunged for the far end of the porch. Sunlight, falling in narrow, dusty beams through the cracks between the porch boards, striped his face from moment to moment. His head pushed through the dusty cobwebs that settled in his hair. He looked back over his shoulder and saw that the leper was halfway out. Won't do you any good to run, Eddie, it called. Eddie had reached the far end of the porch. There was a lattice work skirt here. The sun shone through it, printing diamonds of the light on his cheeks and forehead. He lowered his head and slammed into it with no hesitation at all, tearing the entire skirt free with the scream of rusted halfpenny nails. There was a tangle of rose bushes beyond, and Eddie tore through those, stumbling to his feet as he did so, not feeling the thorns that scrawled shallow cuts along his arms and cheeks and neck. He turned and backed away on buckling legs, pulling his aspirator out of his pocket, triggering it. Surely it hadn't really happened. He'd just been thinking about the hobo, and his mind had just shown him a movie, a horror movie, like those Saturday matinee pictures of Frankenstein and Wolfman that they had sometimes had at the Bajor or the Gem or the Aladdin. Sure, that was all. He had scared himself. What an asshole. There was even time to utter a shaky laugh at the unexpected vividness of his imagination before the rotting hands shot from under the porch, clawing at the rosebuds with mindless ferocity, pulling at them, stripping them, printing beads of blood on them. Eddie shrieked. The leper was crawling out. It was wearing a clown suit, he saw, a clown suit with big orange buttons down the front. It saw Eddie and grinned. Its half-mouth dropped open and its tongue lolled out. Eddie shrieked again, but no one else could have heard one boy's breathless shriek under the pounding of the diesel engine in the train yard. The leper's tongue had not just dropped from its mouth. It was at least 3 feet long and had unrolled like a party favor. It came to an arrow point which dragged in the dirt. Foam, thick, sticky, and yellowish, coursed along through it. Yeah, foam, sticky, and yellowish, coursed along through it. Bugs crawled over it. The rosebuds, which had been showing the first touches of spring green when Eddie broke through them, now turned a dead, lacy black. Blow job, the leper whispered and tottered to its feet. Eddie raced for his bike. It was the race as before, only it now had the quality of a nightmare. We could only move with the most agonizing slowness, no matter how hard he tried to go fast. What? Okay. And in those dreams, didn't you always hear or feel something, some it, gaining on you? Didn't you always smell its sinking breath, as Eddie was smelling it now? For a moment, he felt a wild hope. Perhaps this really was a nightmare. Perhaps he would awake in his own bed, bathed in sweat, shaking, maybe even crying, but alive. Safe. Then he pushed the thought away. Its charm was deadly, its comfort fatal. He did not try to mount his bike immediately. He ran with it, instead, head down, pushing the handlebars. He felt as if he was drowning. Not in water, but inside his own chest. Blow job, the leper whispered. Come back any time, Eddie. Bring your friends. Its rotting fingers seemed to touch the back of his neck, but perhaps that was only a dangling strand of cobweb underneath the porch. Caught in his hair and brushing against his shrinking flesh. Eddie leaped onto his bike and pedaled away, not caring that his throat had closed up as Tilly again, not giving 2 sucks for his asthma, not looking back. He didn't look back until he was almost home, and of course there was nothing behind him when he finally did, but 2 kids headed over to the park to play ball. That night, lying straight as a poker in bed, one hand folded tightly around his aspirator, looking into the shadows, he heard the leper whisper, "Won't do you any good to run, Eddie? It won't do you any good to run, Eddie." I take a little drink. What? Okay. Alrighty. Eight. Wow, Bridgie said respectfully. Off to a great start. It was the first thing any of them had said since Bill Denbrough finished his story. Have you got another cigarette, Bridgie? Bridgie gave him the last one in the pack he had hawked almost empty from his dad's desk drawer. He even let it for Bill. You didn't dream it, Bill? Stan asked suddenly. Bill shook his head. No dream. Real, Eddie said in a low voice. Bill looked at him sharply. What? Real, I said. Eddie looked at him, almost resentfully. It really happened. It was real. And before he could stop himself, before he even knew what he was going to do, Eddie found himself telling the story of the leper that had come crawling out of the basement at 29 Neibolt Street. Halfway through the telling, he began to gasp and had to use his aspirator. At the end, he burst into shrill tears, his thin body shaking. They all looked uncomfortably, and then Sam put a hand on his back. Bill gave him an awkward hug when the others glanced away, embarrassed. That's all right, Eddie. It's okay. I saw it too, Van Hanscom said suddenly. His voice was flat and harsh and scared. Eddie looked up, his face still naked with tears, his eyes red and raw-looking. What? I saw the clown, Ben said. Only he wasn't like you said, at least not when I saw him. He wasn't all gushy. He was dry. He paused, ducked his head, and looked at his hands, which lay palely on his elephantine. Oh, nope. He paused, ducked his head, and looked at his hands, which lay palely on his elephantine thighs. Rude. I think he was the mummy. Like in the movies, Eddie asked. Like that, but not like that, Ben said slowly. In the movies, he looks fake. It's scary, you can tell it's a put-up job, you know? All those bandages, they look too neat or something. But this guy looked like the way a real mummy would look, I think. If you actually found one in a room under a pyramid, I mean. Except for the suit. What suit? Ben looked at Eddie. A silver suit with big orange buttons down the front. Eddie's mouth dropped open. He shut it and said, If you're kidding, say so. I still dream about that guy under the porch. It's not a joke, Ben said and began to tell the story. He told it slowly, beginning with his volunteering to help Mrs. Douglas count the storybooks, ending with his own bad dreams. He spoke slowly, not looking at the others. He spoke as if deeply ashamed of his own behavior. He didn't raise his head again until the story was over. You must have dreamed it, Richie said finally. He saw Ben wince and hurried on. Now don't take it personal, Big Ben, but you got to see the balloons can't, float against the wind. Pictures can't wink either, Ben said. Ooh, he believed Bill but not Ben. Richie looked from Ben to Bill, troubled. Accusing Ben of dreaming awake was one thing. Accusing Bill was something else. Bill was their leader, the guy they all looked up to. No one said so out loud. No one needed to. But Bill was the idea man. The guy who could think of something to do on a boring day. The guy who remembered the games the others had forgotten. And in some odd way, they all sensed something comfortably adult about Bill. Perhaps it was a sense of accountability, a feeling that Bill would take the responsibility if responsibility needed to be taken. The truth was, Richie believed Bill's story, crazy as it was. The truth was, Richie believed Bill's story, crazy as it was. Perhaps he didn't want to believe Ben's, or Eddie's for that matter. Nothing like that ever happened to you, huh? Eddie asked Richie. Richie paused, began to say something, shook his head, paused again, and said, Scariest thing I've seen lately was Mark Prenderless taking a leak in McCarran Park. Ugliest hogger you ever saw. Ugliest hogger you ever saw. Ben said, What about you, Stan? No, Stan said quickly and looked somewhere else. His small face was pale, his lips pressed together so tightly they were white. Was there something, Stan? Bill asked. No, I told you. Stan got to his feet and walked to the embankment, hands in his pockets. He stood watching the water course over the top of the original dam and pile up behind the second water gate. Come on now, Stanley, Richie said in a shrill falsetto. This was another one of his voices, Granny Grunt. When speaking in his Granny Grunt voice, Richie would hobble around with one fist against the small of his back and cackle a lot. He still, however, sounded more like Richie Tozier than anyone else. Fess up, Stanley. Tell your old granny about the bad clown. I'll give you a chocolate chip cookie. You just tell. Shut up, Stan yelled suddenly, whirling on Richie, who fell back a step or two, astonished. Just shut up. Yowza, boss, Richie said and sat down. He looked at Stan nearest mistrustfully. Bright spots of color flamed in Stan's cheeks, but he still looked more scared than mad. That's okay, Eddie said quietly. Never mind, Stan. It wasn't a clown, Stanley said. His eyes flicked from one of them to the next, to the next, to the next. He seemed to struggle with himself. You can tell, Bill said, also speaking quietly. We did. It wasn't a clown. It was... Which was when the carrying, whiskey, roughened tones of Mr. Nell interrupted, making them all jump as if they had been shot. Jesus Christ on a jumped-up chair-driven crutch. Look at this mess. Jesus Christ! That's it. We finished a chapter for the first time ever. Yay! That was chapter 7, the one that I've been waiting to read since we started this. Page 300 pages in. Woo! We did it. Woohoo! Hopefully next time we get through all of chapter 8. Let's see. Nope. Nope. You get through half chapter 8. Maybe. Next time we'll start chapter 8. And we'll see how far we get. Alright. Thank you for joining us. I like that chapter. I liked it a lot. I don't know. I like seeing them all interact. So, and that was one of their most unproblematic interactions. Probably the most unproblematic interaction. As we'll see later. With later things. So, thank you all for joining. I hope you enjoyed yourselves. I hope you had a terrific time reading this wonderful story before bedtime. Or maybe it's not bedtime for you. It's bedtime for me, though. So, yeah. I hope you had fun. And we'll be back next week, next Saturday night at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on this channel to read some of Chapter 8. So, with that, thank you for coming. I'll see you later, alligator. Bye-bye.